We're about to begin the services for Mr. Sander Rosen. I want to welcome all of you here at the chapel as well as everyone viewing online. Just as a gentle reminder for those of you present in the chapel, if you have a cell phone with you, please place it in the silent mode or turn it off completely. That would be appreciated. The service this morning will be conducted by Rabbi Adam Shalom from Kol Hadash Humanistic Congregation.
We begin our service with an outward expression of how we feel on the inside. As the closest family will be wearing ribbons that are torn, a ritual called Korea that reflects on the outside how we feel on the inside. So if I can ask Sander's closest family to come together and participate in this ritual, and we'll begin our service. So, drawing on words in the Hebrew Bible, Proverbs, I'll ask you to repeat after me one word at a time. Zecher, Sadi, Ibraka. The memory of a good person is a blessing. Share the reverence with no problem.
If you need help.
Yeah, sure. Start playing. Small motor skills are not. If you knew anything about Sander, you know that Sander loved classic rock music. What makes a beautiful song? It could be just the lyrics. After all, Bob Dylan has written many meaningful songs, and we all know he's not a gifted singer. It could be the melody, a bass line or a guitar riff or a vocal run that inspires you, that hits you in the guts, that lives on the tip of your tongue. It could be the instrumentation, high energy or a sweet ballad or a sweeping crescendo. It could be a personal connection that you have with a particular song's lyrics or melody or performance when it appeared at an important moment or moments on your own journey. We define a great song like we define a beautiful life. There's no one way to do it. You know it when you experience it, and it stays with you for a long time. Sander Rosen's life had its peaks and its B-sides, but it was meaningful, it was inspirational, it was sweet, and it was personal. It defined so many important moments for people here and beyond. The concert may be over, but the memories remain. I'd like to begin this service with a short poem by the Israeli poet Yehuda Amichai. It's called Shir Hallel, a song of praise. But as we'll see, what he praises is that which stays with us here. First in Hebrew and then in English. Ani רוצה לשיר שיר הלל, לכל מה שנשאר פה איתנו, ולא עוזב, ולא נודד כציפורי הנדוד, ולא בורח צפונה ולא דרומה, ולא שר ליבי במזרח ואנוכי בקצה מערב. אני רוצה לשיר לעצים, שאינם משליכים את עליהם, וסובלים להט קיץ וקור חורף, ולבני אדם שאינם משליכים את זיכרונותיהם, וסובלים יותר מבני אדם שמשליכים הכל. אבל מעל הכל, אני רוצה לשיר שיר הלל לאוהבים, שנשארים יחדיו לשמחה ולצער ולשמחה, לעשות בית, לעשות ילדים, עכשיו ובעונות האחרות. A song of praise. I want to sing a song of praise to all that remains here with us and does not leave, and does not wander like the migrating birds, and does not flee to the north and not to the south, and does not sing, "My heart is in the east and I am at the edge of the west." I want to sing to the trees that do not throw out their leaves and withstand the blaze of summer and the cold of winter, and to those people who do not throw out their memories and withstand more than those people who throw out everything. But above all, I want to sing a song of praise to lovers who remain together for joy and for pain and for joy, to make a home, to make children, now and for the other seasons. The last 18 months have been a hard day's night, a very hard journey. A hard journey for Sander himself, of course, but also for his wife Jennifer, for their children Jonathan and Julia, for his father Richard and his sister Susan and their partners and families, for all of his close friends and colleagues and community. Since his diagnosis in October 2021, Sander had not gone 1 week without a treatment or a doctor appointment or a hospital stay. Sander and his circle of love experienced many emotions: hope and fear, pain and joy, anger and sadness. We hope, to quote a classic movie, that maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon and for the rest of their lives, that they will find peace, that they will be able to feel love for Sander without the pain that comes from seeing a loved one in pain. Emotions are part of being human. There are no right or wrong emotions, no one right way to mourn a loss, no fixed timeline or predictable stages of grief. It can help to be honest with ourselves, to be able to say that we feel cheated, to say that we are angry, to say out loud that it is not fair to lose someone so vibrant, so loving, so loved at age 53 from cancer. In the words of the poet Edna St. Vincent Millay's dirge without music, I do not approve, and I am not resigned. I believe it will also help us if we can try to remember how Sander himself faced illness and imminent death with courage, with hope, and with love. The last song does not define the whole album. Our last days do not define our whole life. With time, with perspective, with recovery, we can appreciate that Sander, in his life as he chose it, was a hero in his own way. Not like the heroes in the classic comic books he loved to collect, but in his own small and personal gestures that add up to a beautiful life. The comic book hero often has a tragic origin story. Superman sent off into space alone, Batman orphaned. By contrast, I do not think growing up with a loving family in Deerfield qualifies as a tragic origin story. Sander's parents, Richard and Joyce, had grown up in Chicago and were living in West Rogers Park when he was born in 1970 in Skokie Valley Hospital. Sander got a lot from both of his parents. He became a lifetime movie buff and comic book collector because of his father, once even watching a showing that was simply 5 hours of only coming attractions. He liked everything from Humphrey Bogart and Cary Grant to Disney cartoons and contemporary movies. And Sander described his mother as perhaps the most important influence on who he wanted to be as a person. He said he tried to live up to her example every day. The family moved to Deerfield on July 1st, 1975, and they discovered that they shared a backyard with the Hilborns, who had moved in just 1 week before. In fact, Harold and Jamie were waiting in the driveway for the moving truck, ready to play. Coincidentally, July 1st, many years later, would be the date that Sander and Jennifer moved to Oak Park with their baby Jonathan. Sharon will share some of her memories later, but to put it briefly, they had a wonderful connection. They were always close, and she always looked up to him, both emotionally and, since Sander was 6 years older and 6'3", physically. Sander even moved home after college until he was 26. Hardly a fortress of solitude or a bat cave. Everyone was sad when he finally did move out because he was the kind of person you wanted to spend as much time with as possible. He was a super son and a super brother. The classic comic book hero only has a few close associates who know their secrets. Their Mary Jane Watsons and their Alfreds, their limited sidekicks. But Sander made close friends at every stage of his life. These are the names he shared with me when we spoke a few weeks ago. I apologize for any omissions. From his earliest years, friends like Jimmy Rubin, Mei-Ling Wong, and Peggy Weiner. His lifetime friends from Wilmot Junior High School and Deerfield High School, and from college, between roommates and friends of roommates and a poker circle. Friends like Mike Pruzan and Dan Perlin, Mark Milstein and Mike Weiner, Sam Lubeck, and Aaron Zarkowski. There were great times spent hanging out listening to classic rock and O'Malley's, playing poker and hearts, sometimes playing basketball. By his own admission, Sander was uncoordinated and unathletic. But since he was the tallest, he would shoot a layup, miss it, get the rebound, and eventually the layup would go in. And Sander enjoyed long walks. In high school, he tried to walk all the way to the Lake Forest Oasis on the tollway. Not a good idea. And in college, a walk through a cornfield left him at a Dairy Queen miles from campus where friends had to pick him up. And once Sander realized that being a lawyer was not a good fit for him, and he switched to marketing, he was both happier and found great work experiences, especially his final job with National Marine Manufacturers Association, who were wonderful colleagues and supportive friends through good times and bad. Every one of Sander's friends and their families knew about his warmth, his passions, his joy of living, and his open nature. He was indeed a super friend. Do comic book heroes get happy family lives? Unusual. Did Sander have a happy family life? Undeniable. Sander met Jennifer in 1996, the same year he shifted to marketing at an ad agency. They were introduced by his friend Dan Perlin, who had happened to meet her in the placement office at DePaul University. It was almost a double-blind date that took Sander a month of nudging before he actually made the call to set up the date. And they wound up on another long walk, not on purpose. They were looking for the restaurant R.J. Grunt's in Lincoln Park, which was a family favorite, but they couldn't seem to find it. So they wound up going somewhere else. He was sure she would never want to go out with him again. It was an exciting and a fast courtship. They fell in love quickly and deeply. They loved traveling together from their first real vacation together in Memphis, including a souvenir wig and a timeless picture of him with an Elvis statue. In Jennifer's words, she made a perfect choice years ago when they met. She could not have chosen a better husband or father for their children. He even warmed up to her love of animals, even though his was not an animal family. Evidently, it took a year's negotiation to get a goldfish. In the end, he got a lot of comfort and walking companionship from their dogs, Jasper and Rhoda, and their cats, Steve and Donna, especially in the last years when he was immunocompromised and had limited social opportunities. They were married in 1999. They had Jonathan in 2001 and moved to Oak Park in 2003, with Julia arriving in 2004. And until 2021, it really was a wonderful life. Sander did lose his mother in 1999, shortly before the wedding, when she was only 52, a sad foreshadowing of his own mortality. But Sander was fully supportive of Jennifer going back to work. He took an equal role in parenting Jonathan and Julia. He was fully involved in their school and activities, always chipping in and attending all those dance recitals and sporting events, even quizzing them to prepare for spelling bees. He shared many of his interests with his children, playing games and watching movies and simply spending time together. They all experienced the COVID lockdown together, 4 people and 4 cats, all together for quality time. And as he put it, they were the best roommates possible. Of course, it was a terrible time for the country and for many families, but it was fortunate for Sander to have that time together. For Sander, quality time with his kids was the best thing he could imagine doing. There were many weekend getaways with each of them, sharing his interests like baseball and movies and rock and roll, if possible, everything on the same trip, like going to Cleveland for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and a baseball game. Julia recalls her first trip at age 3 to St. Charles for a scarecrow festival. And then because she wanted to visit a Main Street, they went to Galena, Illinois multiple times, including regular stays at the Main Street Inn, in different rooms each time. And visiting the Ulysses S. Grant Museum there, Grant's wife was named Julia, by the way. Julia went to summer camp, a 6-hour drive away. And if she couldn't take the bus, he would be happy to drive her those 6 hours there and then 6 hours back just to spend that time with her. She remembers him chauffeuring her and friends to a Harry Styles concert, going to a nail salon simply to spend time together. It was all golden time for Sander when it was with his children. We'll hear more from his son Jonathan in a little bit. But in short, Sander was a super spouse and a super dad. Do superheroes get side interests and hobbies and religious identities? Sometimes they do. Famously, Magneto from the X-Men was a Holocaust survivor who played chess. Ben Grimm, aka The Thing, celebrated an adult bar mitzvah. And Kitty Pryde of the X-Men was born into a Jewish family in, of all places, Deerfield, Illinois. Sander's family's Jewish journey was common, from Orthodox Jewish immigrants from Lithuania to the conservative Judaism in which both of Sander's parents were raised, to his own Reformed Jewish upbringing at BJBE when it was still in Glenview, going to Hebrew school twice a week and Sunday school on Sunday, and 2 years of Hebrew high school and confirmation as well, and of course, years of home holiday celebrations. When Sander and Jennifer were looking for their own Jewish connection, they found that they had evolved one more step, and they joined the secular Jewish community and school in Oak Park. Sander even served on the organization's board for a time. Now, you cannot talk about Sander without mentioning his hobbies. It's almost unfair to call them side interests. While in law school, he wrote a near-future dystopian novel called Crowded Bar, just to clear his head, 1 sentence a day. As mentioned earlier, he loved movies, especially after the house got cable. He started collecting comic books when he was very young, spending the night with his grandparents downtown on the 37th floor and buying a 3-pack of comics at the Hilton gift shop. And in a 3-pack, you could see the front one and the back one, but the middle comic was a mystery and a surprise. He loved classic rock, and he had a deep knowledge of music. In the end, though, when I asked Sander in his last weeks how he wanted to be remembered, he told me that he wanted to be remembered as someone who aspired to be generous, to be empathetic, a close friend, and a dedicated husband and father. I have no doubt that this is exactly how he will be remembered. It was in his last couple years that he was his most heroic. No matter what he faced, from trial treatments to stem cell transplant, to 2 rounds of chemo, to complications from donor cells affecting his eyes and other organs, infections and complications, and multiple serious hospital stays, through all of this, Sander always thought about his family and friends, his loving circle. They were his number one priority, thinking of them both now and for the future. Through all of this, he was always hopeful, taking any treatment necessary to continue and to be around more. They saw how much pain he was in, and it hurt them to see it. But he always had a positive attitude. In the end, that was Sander's superpower, the power to hope, the power of joy, the power of love. Love could not overcome every challenge, but it certainly changes everything. And the family has been overwhelmed by the love that Sander put out into the world to family and friends coming back to him in these last weeks, and now to them as well. It is a new world without Sander in it. It feels a little bit less musical, like the songs he loved, a little bit less colorful, like those comic book covers, a little less vibrant, like the best movies and baseball games. It will take getting used to. And there is no set timetable for grief. In years to come, though, I can see people in this room and beyond, those connected to Sander by experience and by love. They'll be able to look back on their time with him fondly. I hope that your memories will be like a treasured old comic book kept in a plastic sleeve. You will pull it out, you will leaf through it, remembering the laughs and the tears, the joy and the pain and the joy. Sandra lived a beautiful life, and now that book is closed. The next chapters of his lasting influence are for us to write in his memory. Before we hear messages from close friends and family, we'll hear a selection from one of Sandra's favorite songs by his favorite band. It is by the Beatles, and the song is, appropriately, While My Guitar Gently Weeps. Personal messages to be shared by two friends and by two members of his family. First, a message from his friend Mike Pruzan, which I will read. Sandra would be insisting that I hold off on sharing words until the next gathering of our U of I crew, aka Yutzes, as opposed to prolonging everyone right now having to sit in this kind of environment, which Sandra would hate. So I'll indeed keep it short, and I'll try to do what I know Sandra would want done, which is to hopefully get most, if not everyone, even for just a brief moment, to smile. I loved seeing the words, Sandra had a beautiful life, in his obituary, because I think it's 100% true that Sandra loved his life journey. He had a steel-trap memory, and it never ceased to amaze me the random events he'd collect from 20, 30 years ago that would bring such a smile to his face. I think Sandra is the epitome of someone who never took himself too seriously and was always open to new things, whether it be style and fashion that Jen introduced him to after 30 pre-Jen years of pretty much ratty t-shirts and old blue jeans, or learning basketball 101 and becoming a true fan of the game, all thanks to Jonathan. Regarding both Jonathan and Julia, it couldn't be better said than the way Jen and family expressed it. Family was the center of Sandra's universe. Jonathan and Julia, even though I haven't seen you guys in forever, never would there be a conversation with Sandra that did not include things like the latest and greatest on how life at American University was going, or a spur-of-the-moment call from Sandra hanging outside a thrift shop, absolutely loving that Julia and Jen were inside finishing up yet another exploration through every aisle of the shop. Sandra, my friend, I picture you now in some fantastic Sanderland, where you can walk for hours and hours, encountering an interesting comic book store after record shop after movie theater, and of course street food, Italian and Jewish deli, no doubt, available every few blocks. Enjoy it, as we all will continue enjoying the pleasure of being part of your beautiful life. And so now we'll hear first from Sandra's friend Harold Hilborn, then his sister Susan, and his son
I met Sander in the summer of 1975, just before we started kindergarten. Now we know it was July 1st. I did not know that. Only Sander would remember the exact date. My family had just moved to Deerfield, and when we took a walk around the block, we met the Rosens on the driveway of their house. They were going to be moving in the next week. I guess this explains how we knew to be waiting for the moving truck. I did not remember that. Sander did. The first thing that stood out about Sander was that he was gigantically tall. My parents were surprised that we were the same age. We became fast friends. Our yards backed up to the Rosens, and it wasn't long before one of the bushes that divided the yards had been trampled. That's how often we were at each other's houses. There was a period of time in elementary school that we had some sort of a fight every day. Who knows about what? But we always made up the very same day. And I think that's because Sander was so easygoing. A lot of that came from Joyce, who once saw us having some sort of argument in the backyard. And she said to my mom, "Aren't they wonderful?" And then closed the blinds so that she just couldn't see us attempting to pummel one another. That laid-back optimism is something that never left Sander. As recently as February, when his graft versus host disease was causing him so much suffering, if you'd ask Sander how he was doing, he would always add, "But I'm cancer-free." And when he started on hospice, he approached it with enthusiasm. He was excited to watch the entire Godfather trilogy with his family. Don't know how excited everyone else was about the movie, but I'm sure excited to have that time with Sander. Sander planned to and did expand his comic book collection. And he asked me several times while he was making the purchases, "Do you know how liberating it is to be able to do this?" Back to childhood. For all that height, Sander was not blessed with athletic talent. Years later, he told me that Jonathan must have inherited a recessive gene. He was amused, and he was really proud. Now, despite Sander not having a shred of athletic skill, we played games of one-on-one baseball in Sander's yard. And when Ginger, the German Shepherd, moved in next door and we somehow started hitting balls over the fence, Sander was always the one who fearlessly retrieved the slobber-covered ball. When Sander and I reminisced about our childhood a few weeks ago, I reminded him of the time that he came to my family's lake house with another of our friends. They came on a Greyhound bus, 2 buses actually. It was a 7-hour trip. And looking back, we were amazed that anyone's parents allowed something like that to happen. Sander remembered that trip vividly, and then he described his attempt at learning to water ski. He described it as disastrous. And for the first time, I shared with Sander a little secret that I had had for over 40 years, and that was that my dad had drawn a stick figure diagram of the water ski experience, which he mailed to my sister at camp. Words could not describe the flailing arms and legs. We had a really good laugh about that. And Sander laughed about other things, things that for years were a sore spot, like the second grade class picture where he sneezed. It looked like he was vomiting. And the velour suit that he had in junior high. Growing up, Sander was the creator of all fun. He made up a game called Jailbreak. It was a cross between tag and hide and seek. It was usually played at dusk with all of the kids in the neighborhood, none of whose parents had a clue where their kids were at. The jail was practically below ground in Sander's yard. Sander was creative. He made up a song, an irreverent one, about the elementary school lunch lady, and an even more irreverent one about all of our teachers, which he made up just when we moved on to junior high. He still remembered all the funniest parts of those songs. No Hebrew school carpool, no carpool of any kind will ever compare to the ones with Sander. There were no iPhones, no iPads, no DVDs, and we did not need them because Sander entertained us by all the time. He hosted a game show in the car called Joker's Wild, and he narrated a soap opera called Strange But True Happenings. And this wasn't a one-time thing. It was every single week. It is a wonder that our parents did not kill us. We once made some money off of Sander's creativity by putting on a fun fair with games and prizes in my driveway. Sander was the brainchild of that venture. Sander was smart. Years before Google Maps and long before he learned to drive, he had an encyclopedic knowledge of streets and of train stops, all of them. He could have invented Google Maps. Sander knew everything about TV and movies long before IMDb. I think he memorized the TV Guide magazine that his family subscribed to. Every week, he memorized it. Sander's intelligence didn't always lead to great decisions. In 7th grade, we were having a hard time with our English homework, diagramming sentences, a very useless activity in hindsight. Our mothers helped us with the homework, and actually they did more than help. They did all of the work, and they did it in such an advanced way that it was very obvious that we had not done it ourselves. And we did get in a little bit of trouble with the teacher. I don't remember Sander ever causing any real trouble. We were, after all, part of a group of kids who regularly trekked out to Palatine to play laser tag. This was not a party crowd. But there was a police incident, though. We witnessed a battery while walking home from the swimming pool when we were 15. It might have even been a little bit our fault that one of our classmates punched a 40-year-old adult who was mowing his lawn. Sander and I and the other kids ran away. The police later showed up at our houses. And several months later, Sander and Jimmy Rubin and I were picked up at school by a police officer and driven to the Lake County Courthouse in a squad car so that we could testify at the criminal trial. Sander was a kind and caring and loyal friend. There isn't anything that he wouldn't do for the people he loved. Sander's death is a tragedy. Having Sander in my life for 48 years was a blessing.
Hi. Impromptu little story. So, no offense, my name is Sharon, and that's totally fine. Okay, but what's even funnier about it is we actually, like, Sandra would be laughing at that, and my dad probably is laughing at that mistake of calling me Susan, because growing up, that was actually like my little alter ego. There was as stories have been told, much time was spent watching movies with my father, and there was one movie he would play all the time. Was it Finian's Rainbow? Is that what it was? And the beginning of it is, "You're not Sharon at all, you're Susan the Silent." In which case, they would then call me all the time Sharon the Noisy. So of all names, that's actually a funny one to mix up. Okay. So you also hear some kind of similar sentiments and stories. Gosh, I look so tall.
Yes.
I love my brother. I wanted to speak today because there are so many thoughts and stories I wanted to share, but this was the hardest thing I've ever chosen to write. I don't want to say goodbye to my brother, but yet here we are. Last week, I ran into an old friend of my brother's, and as soon as she saw me, she sweetly shared her condolences and said, "To know Sander was to love Sander," and that captures it. Kind of a joke you said. I've always looked up to my brother, both literally, because he was very tall, and figuratively. For my parents and I, my brother was on a pedestal, and we never took him down from it. He was perfect in our eyes. the perfect son, and the most amazing brother, and I never took having him in my life for granted. As a kid, friends would complain about their siblings, but I always knew I was lucky. I had Sandra for my brother. My brother and I were 6 years apart, and while my parents did not originally intend for us to have such a large age difference, I was always grateful there was no one in between. And I'm not just saying this in hindsight. My parents and I always viewed my brother as someone special. As a younger sibling, I was proud to follow in his footsteps. Being 6 years apart in age, we did not have many of the same teachers. Sorry, my mouth is dry. But when we did, I loved entering the school year as, quote, Sandra's sister. Working at Banner Day Camp was the same thing. Sandra worked at Banner for 8 wonderful summers. He loved working there, and he would have gladly continued if he could have. I joined him and became a part of the Banner family during his final 2 summers there. And when I started there, I was known as Sandra's sister. And while I myself continued to work there for 6 more summers, I don't think I ever left that identity in the eyes of anyone who worked there with him. And I was actually completely fine with that. Sandra was always the mediator, the peacekeeper in our family. If my parents wanted me to do something or to not do something, they would go to Sandra for his advice. And they'd say, Sandra, can you talk to your sister? Can you help us? Likewise, I would do the same thing and ask him to talk to our parents. We all saw him as wise beyond his years. I always took any advice my brother gave me to heart. As a parent now, I'll notice myself often telling my children stories about our brother-sister fun days or saying to them, can I share with you something Uncle Sandra said to me when we were kids? And try to guide them as he has always guided me. Together, my brother and I have spent the last 24 years trying to understand and live with the loss of our mom. Her life also ended way too soon. She lost, as you mentioned, she lost her own father when he was just 51 and she was 15. And then we lost her when she was practically the same age at 52. While her memories and spirit have guided us through these years, Sandra and I spent much time in the past 2 months thinking about her and the influence she had on us and our lives. When thinking about our parents, Sandra commented on how our dad shaped so much of his passions and interests. Movies, musicals, history, politics, the list is endless. When I asked him about our mom, without batting an eye, he said, well, she constantly influences who I want to be, the type of person I want to be. And for those of you who knew our mom, you know how she too was such an incredible, loving, kind person. I feel so grateful that I had the chance to tell Sandra that while I feel the exact same way about our parents, he too has always been an influence on who I want to be, the type of person I want to be. One important influence I owe to both Sandra and my mom is actually my love of reading. I have so many wonderful memories of reading with my mom and listening to her read. So, however, while I became a reading specialist, I was not always eager myself to pick up a book as a kid. My mom would often try and encourage me to pick up a book and not just read, teen magazines. So Sandra always very creative, the quote, Sandra Rosen book club for me. So for every 6 books that I would read within one season, he would then create and give me a certificate and do something fun. Even at the end of his life, when he was trying to make sure everyone was as set as we could be, he told me to get some paper and write down his list of book recommendations that I should read. He was always thinking about everyone else. Not only has Sandra played a role in influencing my interests, like our mom, he too has always been an influence on who I want to be, the type of person I want to be. I think about my mom every day, and I hope I am the mom to my own children that she was for me. Since the day Jonathan was born, I've seen all those wonderful traits in Sandra as a father and husband. And Jonathan, did I say it just Jonathan? Oh, since he was born, right, as a father, Julie as a husband, or Julie as the father, Jennifer as a husband. Sandra and I would often talk about what our mom would have been like as a grandmother, and that is how I see him as a father. Those were his favorite people in the world. He would light up as he talked about whatever was going on in their lives. Jonathan and Julia are slightly older than Alana and Jacob, so as my children would reach certain stages or start to embark on similar activities, he would often reflect and share advice and stories from when Jonathan and Julia went through similar situations. He was a hands-on, loving, and supportive father and husband, but he was also a lot of fun to be with. Sandra had a great sense of humor, and he was always up for a good time. He loved to take each of the kids away on a solo getaway weekend, but he also loved to just hang out with them at home. I remember going to his house one day when the kids were very little, and they had some sort of like little ball playpen type thing, and he asked me if I wanted to go in there with the kids. so I kind of gave him a look, it was pretty small, as he climbed in and started playing with them. He wasn't an observer. He was an active participant in their lives. As has been mentioned, Sander was truly an eternal optimist. So much so, in fact, that it was honestly really hard to tell how serious his health situation was during this past year and a half, because he always had such a positive attitude. Even at the end, when he could barely see and barely move, when a friend would ask him if he was comfortable, he'd respond enthusiastically, "Yes, I'm loving this time with my family." Our mom did so much for us every day that when she passed away, I panicked, wondering how would we go on without her. To respond to my initial worries, I remember Sander saying, "Logistics we'll figure out. It's the daily things that will be hard." And that's how I feel now. Sander took such care to make sure any logistical things were taken care of, but now comes the hard part of having to experience future life without him. I will miss him at holidays and all of our fun meals. The Rosens are big eaters who love to go out to eat. I'll miss fun outings with him, such as when we took the kids to Great America each summer, or our extended family trips to Door County, Michigan, and Lake Geneva. I'll miss being able to share and laugh with him about different childhood memories, reflecting back at the absurdity and quirkiness that comes from those many you-had-to-be-there moments. And recently, we had many days that Sander called Sander Memorabilia Days. And it's amazing how many artifacts of his life that he has collected. And it was incredible to be able to relive and reflect on his life with him. Most of all, I will miss just being able to call Sander and spend time together. I love my brother.
When I think back on my time with my dad, there's just so much to say. He means so much to me, and over the past few days and weeks, I've gotten to see just how much he means to so many people. Sitting with my dad and Aunt Sharon this past month, I got the chance to hear many moving messages from friends throughout his life, and stories from him to match. I know just how much he appreciated all this love that he received, and how much all the positive messages over the past few days would have meant to him. As most of you know, my dad battled an aggressive form of cancer over the past year and a half. However, you would not realize this after having a conversation with him. The positivity and hopefulness that he lived his life with only continued as he fought through this illness. He did everything he could and fought until he had nothing left to fight with. His optimism gave me hope and reassurance during the scariest portion of my life. There are so many memories that I have with my dad. Way too many to discuss right now. Whether it was our yearly getaway weekend trips, watching the NBA, movies, or our favorite TV shows like Survivor. When I was with my dad, I always knew that it would be a good time. Seeing the anticipation in his face as his food arrived at restaurants always made even the most mediocre meals an exciting experience. We also went on many vacations and visits with relatives from both sides of our family. He really treasured his entire family, so much so that he brought up these experiences even in his final days. Some of my favorite memories with my dad took place in the summer going into my senior year of high school. That summer, I played on a basketball team that traveled across the country. The two of us went to places such as Las Vegas, St. Louis, and Minneapolis, and for all those trips, my dad and I were able to travel together. During these car rides and hotel stays, we were able to talk for hours and spend so much uninterrupted time together. Despite all of these amazing memories, what I will miss most about my dad is his constant presence in my life. As I've grown up, I've been so lucky to have two wonderful parents that have always been there for me whenever I needed help with homework, a ride to school, or even just someone to talk to. I knew that my dad would always be there for me and my sister Julia. His family was always the most important thing to him, and even in his last few weeks, he continued to talk about it or to think about us before he thought of himself. I know he loved being my dad, and I hope he knew how much I loved being his son. He is my hero, and not a day will go by where I will not miss him with everything in me.
When we lose someone who was such an active presence in our lives, there is a hole in our hearts that cannot be filled. It can be surrounded by the love of family and friends at a memorial service, at a Shiva gathering, in the days and weeks to come when the noise dies down and the quiet emerges. If Sander is not here to take care of us, to care for us, to love us as he would, the responsibility falls upon us to reach out to his family and to his friends, to remember Jennifer and Jonathan and Julia, Richard and Tessa, Sharon and David, Ilana and Jacob. All of these are now a part of our loving circle, and our wish for them is that in the days and weeks to come, they achieve a sense of peace. They can remain angry, there can be bitter feelings, but when they think of their father, we hope nothing but peace and love. If you're comfortable standing, can I ask you to please stand for a moment? On the back side of the service folder you received upon entering the chapel, you will see a humanistic version of the Kaddish. The traditional Kaddish is a praise of the supernatural. This Kaddish is a praise of this world, and most importantly, it is a praise of the power of peace. The peace that Sander has now found, the peace that we wish for those who loved him. I'll recite this text first in Hebrew, or Aramaic, and then in English. Please feel free to join me as you're moved. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shlomo ba'alma. Nivra Shlomo chirutana v'namlich malchute b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru shalom. Yehei Shlomo Rabba mevorach le'elam u'le'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach, yitpa'ar v'yitromam, v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalal, Shlomo be'alma, brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nehemata da'amiran ba'alma, v'imru shalom. Yehei Shlomo Rabba v'chaim, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru shalom. Na'aseh shalom ba'olam, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru shalom. Wonderful is peace in the world. Let us create a peaceful world and let us establish its kingdom now and in the future. May peace come upon us to bless our lives. May we always continue to honor peace in the world, even though no praise can equal the importance of its reality. May peace and life prevail for us and for all Israel. Let us work to create peace here on earth for all people, and let us say, peace, shalom. Inside of the booklet, there is a responsive reading poem entitled simply, We Remember Him. Please say the words, We Remember Him together for each stanza. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, together, we remember him. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember him. In the opening of the buds and in the warmth of summer, we remember him. In the rustling of leaves and the beauty of autumn, we remember him. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember him. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember him. So long as we live, he too shall live, for he is now a part of us as, together, we remember him. Let us pause for a moment of silent tribute in memory of Sander Rosen and in love of the love he gave to us. As we begin our service with the tearing of ribbons, we share the same words at its conclusion from the Hebrew Bible in the book of Proverbs, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, the memory of a righteous and good person is a blessing to us. Please be seated.
Immediately following the service today at the chapel, there will be a private interment, family only, at the Jewish Waldheim Cemetery. The Shiva will be observed at the Lieberman residence at 2225 Oak Avenue in Northbrook today and tomorrow, Monday and Tuesday, from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. This information is listed in your service folder you received on your way in today. If you did not receive one, you can please stop in the lobby and receive one. And for those of you viewing online, this information is also listed on our website. The following pallbearers have been selected to serve as, following gentlemen have been selected to serve as pallbearers. Gentleman and lady, as I call your name, please step forward. David Lieberman, Harold Hilborn, Mike Pruzan, and Becky Gallagher. I'll ask everyone to please rise now as we escort Mr. Rosen's casket, the family, and the clergy from the chapel.